Game of the Year edition by Robert Carnevale. Please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that name quite correctly. But anyway, this book was generously sent to me last year by its author for review. Now, with books that are sent to me for review, I always like to say I'm not sure when I'll be able to get to them because I do have always kind of a rough general TBR that I'm working through. But I will get to them eventually, or try to at least. And here we are in the next year doing the review. So the time frame might not necessarily be the tightest, but like I say, I will do my best to get to them at some point. But like I say, this book was sent to me last year by its author for review, and I had never heard of this book before. I had no clue what to expect out of it. But I have to say, having read it now, I was quite pleased with the product. I found the story of Earth, the Game of the Year edition, to be highly absorbing and quite enjoyable. I believe it is a self-published book, but there is nothing about it which would automatically make me assume that, because it is of such quality that it could just as well be a professionally published book. And I'm very happy to be able to say that because, self-published books don't always have the best reputation, but this one is on the upper end of things because this is a very quality product. And like I say, I quite enjoyed it. Although I do have some criticisms to offer. But anyway, what is the story of Earth Game of the Year edition? Well, this book is a comedic science fiction novel, which is in many ways kind of reminiscent of a more lighthearted take on The Matrix. In fact, one of the criticisms that I could offer of it is that certain elements of it, especially towards the end, felt a little too reminiscent of The Matrix. It felt like it was cribbing a little, perhaps too much from that film, but it is, like I say, a comedic science fiction novel which follows a main character named Jack. Jack is kind of a schmuck as the book opens. He is basically a nobody who is working a soulless job in, I guess, like a tech company or something. He pretty much hates his life. He lives in a shitty apartment, doesn't have the greatest social life. Like I say, he's just kind of a schmuck. But then one day, Jack has pretty much had enough, and he is going to throw himself off of a bridge and just end it all. But before he does so, he receives a call from a mysterious caller who informs Jack that his world is not actually real, that he himself is not actually real. He is a program in a video game. He is a character in a video game. And when I say video game, I don't mean video game like Doom or Call of Duty or something like that. It's like Sim City, basically. It's basically a grand, more advanced version of Sim City, and Jack is an avatar, a player avatar in this fictitious game, which is called Earth. And the caller who is addressing him is a teenage boy who identifies himself as Rax. And the Jack sections of the book are told in first person, but the quote-unquote real world sections of the book are told in third person, and we don't get a lot of background or context in the real world sections, but can kind of infer that it's in some kind of near future, and that video game technology has apparently advanced to the point where programs in the game are basically like self-aware entities. So Rax, the teenage boy who is playing the game Earth, and whose avatar Jack is, informs him that he's going to help him out, and they're going to boost Jack's stats to earn achievements in the game. Right? So Rax basically turns Jack's life around, turns him into a ladies' man with some serious style. His job gets better. He starts moving on up in the world and kinds of stops being a schmuck. But wouldn't you know it, they run into some problems. Jack kind of spills the beans to a friend of his named Angela that their world is just a video game, and that causes some serious problems health-wise for his friend, because apparently the NPCs in the game cannot handle the revelation that they are just NPCs in a game, and so then files start getting corrupted, and Rax, the player, has to intervene and do some cyber repair in order to save the life of Jack's NPC friend named Angela. But in doing that, they draw down the ire of the devs of the game because they're basically cheating. And then Jack finds himself being hunted by a malevolent program, and like an anti-cheating program in the game, which is who identifies itself as John. And this is, once again, very reminiscent of the Matrix. This is where it gets very, very kind of too similar to the Matrix, where our main character finds himself being relentlessly pursued by what is, in essence, Agent Smith from the Matrix, to eliminate the cheating and restore the game to its normal parameters. And anyway, in the end, Drax tries to save the life of Jack, the Avatar, in the game by porting him to a private server, which the devs do not have access to, in which the Agent Smith-like program cannot come onto. But once Jack gets there, he finds things are perhaps not quite as idyllic as they could be, and it ends kind of weirdly. And the ending of the book is definitely my biggest criticism of it, I suppose. But anyway, that is the plot of Earth Game of the Year Edition. Again, it's basically like SimCity mixed with the Matrix, but with a much more lighthearted and comedic tone. Let's talk about the technical qualities of this work. So the writing in this book is good. It is very strong. The prose is not the most like breathtakingly beautiful, but what it lacks in ornateness, it more than makes up for in wit and earnestness, because the majority of the book is told in first person present tense by Jack. And the voice with which the story is narrated is very, very well done, I think. Jack feels like a real person, even though within the context of the book he is merely a character in a video game. Jack feels like a real person, and he feels like that guy that we all know who lives in a shitty apartment working a soulless job with little in the way of social life, who just basically hates his life. He feels like that person, and it comes out the gate strong, and it's a very, very strong voice that the story is told with. I really don't have anything to complain about. It's rather straightforward language, not very artsy-fartsy, you might say, but again, just the voice of it is very strong, and it's very compelling. So I have to really commend it for the writing. Now, as for the characters, like I say, the majority of the book is told in the first person by Jack, and Jack is a quite well-rendered character because he does feel very real, even though within the context of the book itself, he is not very real. But he is a pretty well-rendered character, I think, and his emotions, his thoughts, and such are relatable, and they're very human. Now, the secondary characters do have some level of depth and personality, but not nearly as much as the main character. And of course, being that this is, by and large, a first-person book, I suppose that is excusable. But where it counts, I think the book really does get the job done. Jack is a pretty well-done character, so I don't really have too much to complain about with the characters. Now let's talk about the story, and we can also talk about some of the issues that I had with it, because like I say, I do have some criticisms of it, but they're not deal breakers by any means. They're just minor critiques, I would say. So first of all, the character of Angela in the book is never properly explicated. So Angela is like Jack's best friend, old flame, ex-girlfriend. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, because the book never really explains the nature of their relationship. It's kind of just up in the air. What their background is. She is like, it's very apparent that she is very intimately connected with him, but I thought initially that she was like his sister, but then it's apparent that they're not blood related. She is some kind of ethnicity which is different from him. But they're like very, very close friends. But then there's kind of an element of romance there. But then Jack doesn't seem to have a problem getting with other women in the book. So I didn't really ever know exactly what the nature of their relationship was. And if I found that very odd that the book never gave any like concrete background on them to explain to the reader exactly what the nature of their relationship was. It's like very intimate friendship, quasi romantic, but you kind of just pick that up as it goes on, and we don't know how they know each other, how they got to know each other, or anything. And considering that Angela is such a major part of the book, like a very massive part of the book, a very crucial part of the narrative, again, I just found that odd that her character was never properly explained or really explained at all. It felt like there was something missing there, and it was kind of glaring in a way. But again, it doesn't really break the story. It's just something that I think really could have been more intensive, I suppose. But also, the ending to the book is probably my biggest criticism of it. It ended weirdly, and it felt kind of abrupt, and I didn't really understand the ending that well. So in the very end, as Jack is being hunted by the anti-cheating program in the game, which is basically like Agent Smith, and he is, and the player kid outside the game is trying to port him to a private server to save his little digital life. It's a really good climactic finale. But then once we get to the new server, once Jack escapes the main game, so to speak, it's kind of weird. Jack finds himself in a world that is not quite as idyllic as he thought. He's kind of the odd man out. He's kind of a stranger in a strange land, you might say. And it ended, I thought, like it was setting up for a sequel, like Jack is going to try to escape the game, somehow get out of the confines of the new environment that he finds himself in, or something like that. And then there's an epilogue, which I did not really understand at all. I didn't understand how that fit into the context of things. And there's no resolution as regards the kid who's like playing the game. That element of the story is just kind of dropped. So the ending was kind of shaky a little bit, I think. Like, I see what happened, but I don't really understand fully what happened. And I also think that it ended perhaps a little too abruptly, and some things could have been explained a little bit better or made a little more apparent. So the ending was a little creaky. But also, another criticism that I had of this, and this is probably the least important criticism, but this book really did feel like it was ripping a lot from The Matrix. Not just because it's about the character who lives in a simulation, but also because the character eventually finds himself being hunted relentlessly by a program hell-bent on eliminating the main character. And it really does feel just like Agent Smith out of The Matrix. Like he can like replicate, he can like kind of break the rules of the game, so to speak. It felt like it was cribbing just a teensy bit too hard from The Matrix. So again, a little bit too similar to that film, I think. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I thoroughly enjoyed Earth Game of the Year edition. I think it is, it's one of the better self-published books that I've ever read. It has a serious level of quality to it, which makes it easily on par with a lot of professionally published books out there, and I'm very happy to be able to say that. I don't think it's quite perfect. Again, there were some criticisms that I had of it, but overall the experience was such that I really just had a blast with it. And so to rate Earth Game of the Year edition by Robert Carnevale, I'm going to give this book a B. I think it is a very solid effort that falls just short of greatness because there are some elements and aspects that could have been done just a teensy bit better. But by and large, this book was just insanely fun. It was quite engrossing. It's really something of a page turner, honestly, and I really did just have a blast reading it. Much appreciation and great thanks to its author for sending it to me. I think there's some real talent on display here, and like I say, I had a great time reading it, so it gets a good solid B for me. Now, Earth Game of the Year Edition by Robert Carnevale. Have you read this book? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said here today. And if you haven't read Earth Game of the Year Edition, I could recommend picking this up. Definitely, if you want to support an indie author in their endeavors, this is, again, a quality product which should not disappoint you. And I think it's just an insanely fun book to read. So I could recommend it. And as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.